Okay, so thank you everybody for joining today's webinar, our first Murex webinar by Excelian. What we're going to cover today is, let's say, a broad range of topics covering an introduction to Excelian Luxoft, looking back at the last 15 years of Excelian within financial services, and in particularly in the Murex space. Very broad brush overview of the current project portfolio that we have, some kind of anatomy of the key large transformation programs that we see, which gives you a flavour of the type of activities that we as Excelian are engaged in these types of projects. The type of product trends that we see from a Murex perspective, mostly anchored within what we see happening in terms of the functionalities that are being brought into the current pipeline of projects in the market, and some of the more aspirational set of aspects of what Murex are looking to bring to the market. Then we'll look at the type of career paths that we offer our Murex consultants within the Excelian practice. Hopefully you'll get a flavour of that as we step through the projects, the clients, and the types of activities that we're undertaking on those projects as to the type of career and activities you'd be engaged in as an Excelian consultant. And then an introduction to our team, our recruitment team, and understand how to follow up afterwards and discuss potential opportunities with our recruitment team. So first of all, very brief overview of myself. So I've been the head of the Murex practice here at Excelian for the last 9 months. Prior to that, I mean, going way back 2001, 2002, I started to engage in the Murex space on the ABN AMRO project, the very early days of 3.1. Moving on to JP Morgan, Commerzbank, and UniCredit. And prior to joining Excelian, I spent over 4 years working directly for Murex in the client management team. So I had a good oversight in terms of product, pre-sales, client management, and so on and so forth. And so currently, as I said, lead of the practice for Murex at Excelian, and acting as the principal kind of relationship manager and pre-sales manager in the EMEA region, and complemented by my colleagues in North America and APAC. So let's look at an introduction to Luxoft. So Luxoft are a leading global technology organisation operating across a number of industries. So telecoms, aviation, travel, the energy sector, automotive, etc. But by and large, the more than half of the activity performed by Luxoft group is in the financial services sector. So if you think about that in the context of some of the statistics you're looking at in terms of 12,000 employees, 150 clients, projected revenues of $775 million for fiscal year 2017, and targeting a 25% annual growth rate. Put that in the context of the financial services sector for Luxoft, that means 6,500 employees, in excess of 70 clients, etc. So they're clearly a leader in that field. And in terms of the tie-up with Excelian, it's been a massive boost, for the Excelian brand, if you like, within the Luxoft group. Luxoft are clearly bringing a lot of scale. They're bringing their balance sheet to bear from an Excelian Murex perspective. The investments that can be made are really helping us accelerate our business. The fact that Luxoft have well-established world-class facilities in the CEE that allows us to easily set up and scale and bring capability to our nearshore offering, which is critical given the type and scale of programs that we're looking to engage in, and also helping us to have an expansive set of capabilities both onshore and nearshore, and allowing us to achieve a cost point that allows us to compete with our other integrators in the Murex space. A little bit about the Excelian story in the last 15 years. So, Excelian are one of the leading Murex integrators globally at this point in time. We've probably, in the last few years, fared much better than competitors if you look post-crisis and pre-crisis and post-crisis. There's been a lot of ebb and flow in the integrator network space within the Murex world, and there's very good reasons why Excelian stand here today as one of the leading, if not one of the top 2 or 3 leading integrators globally. So we've been working in Murex now for 15 years. We have delivered in excess of 200 implementations. We've delivered in excess of 2.5 million hours of Murex services to our clients. We've got 3,000 hours of training delivered to our Murex consultants, and we've pushed almost 50 consultants through some very specific Murex embeddment training in Paris, and we have a very close working relationship with Murex, as you would expect, of Excelian being a global alliance partner for Murex. And if you look at more recently, and I come on to talk about this a little bit later, we've had some quite good success in the last 9 months, picking up 5 of the major Murex programs that have come to market. We deliver across the globe, so 6 continents globally. We've been a top alliance partner with Murex for the past 8 years. We deliver across 10 offices, and we operate in 27 countries. So what is our plan for 2016? Well, given that we're 2/3 of the way through the year, you would expect that we've done a lot already. So we've competed very strongly in the early part of this year with clients who've come to market with some extremely large programs of work, and we've been very successful in winning those and competing with our competitors in that space. And what that means for us is that we have a very strong pipeline of work which is feeding in the next 3 months through to the middle of next year. That's the kind of range of when these programs start. And you saw that number of 188 consultants. We probably need to add 40 or 50 consultants to that alone through organic growth to service the pipeline of work that we have. And we come on to talk a little bit about the anatomy of some of those projects and what it means for people working for us and the type of work that we're engaged in, and that if you were to join us, that you could also be engaged in. So the latter part of this year is really about still servicing the strong pre-sales pipeline that we see. We still see a lot of clients coming to market at the latter part of this year in terms of looking to initiate new projects. But in terms of the pipeline that we already have, we're looking to drive, our recruitment strategy. We're looking, of course, for permanent colleagues and also associates, i.e. contractors who we can develop long-term relationships with. And really, we want to be the place to work in the Murex space, meaning that we have a very strong, stable and predictable pipeline of work across interesting new clients, but also what's been an interesting story this year is the development of our incumbent client base is growing quite dramatically as well in terms of the demands that we see from our long-standing clients that we've had partnerships with now for the last 5 years, 10 years, etc. In preparation to meet some of the demands that we have coming up for the large programs of work, obviously we're looking to expand our nearshore capability. That's both in terms of scale, but also in terms of tooling processes and refining our onshore versus nearshore delivery methodologies, but also preparing for life after the project, which means for us, converting some of our client opportunities, project opportunities into managed services opportunities. And obviously, if you look at the strength and the core around Luxoft, in terms of the synergies that we have there, Luxoft, perform already and are well established in the application management and application development space. So they have a high level of expertise in providing large teams to the likes of tier 1 banks across the globe in the locations that we would already look to set up in terms of our nearshore capability. So Luxoft are bringing the blueprint of how we achieve that application management, application development services. Like we said, we have got first-class infrastructure in the CEE. We've got all of the security needs covered that are required by our clients in order to engage in a nearshore model. Looking at our internal organisation over the coming few months, so clearly we have established communities of practice within Excelian that we're looking to strengthen even further. So in terms of front office and risk, back office integration, architecture, project methodologies and project services. That helps us push and garner capabilities in each of those spaces, and those guys can contribute towards, real assets and tooling that we actually bring to bear within our projects and also within the support space, and also help us provide advisory, publish white papers, etc., to the market to show that we are abreast of latest trends, both within the industry but also within the particular Murex space as well. And in terms of governance structure, and making sure that we have a regional balance, a lot of the programs that we're seeing, some are run in London, some are actually being run elsewhere within Europe. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate governance structure from an internal perspective, and also in terms of how we engage on the client side, and also how we engage with our clients and also with Murex, because as you'll see, and when we break down the anatomy of some of these programs, the tri-party model in terms of how we engage, the transparency of information and the governance between each of three parties engaged in the program is a key success factor. And like I said, we've had a very strong start to the year. We're making good headway in terms of our organic growth targets, but also we're looking out for potential strategic acquisitions to build our capabilities in the future. And it could be that if you follow the Excelian Luxoft story over the next 6 months to 1 year, you'll hear more about that in that space. So let's say at the macro level, in terms of market trends, what have we seen in the last 6 months, 9 months, 1 year? So, the overriding trend that we see is the huge success and the continued success of Murex in picking up and winning the title of preferred technology vendor for these large transformation projects that we've seen. I think Murex has probably won all of the major transformation projects, or been selected as the core vendor, let's say, for the large transformation projects that we've seen come to the market in the last 12 months. And like I said, we don't see that stopping. There are very good reasons why Murex is being selected, and why Murex repeatedly it manages to beat the competition. And we'll touch on some of those aspects in the following slides. The trend of large-scale business refactoring by financial institutions, meaning actually the business that they conduct, the operations that support that, and the IT that supports that. We don't see any slowdown in that necessarily coming, and those of you following the financial news quite closely will probably guess that the stresses that certain financial organisations are under are going to push them towards large-scale consolidation. So in the last 12 months, we've seen maybe the first batch of very large clients come to the market in this space, but it's certainly not the end, and we probably see that cycle continuing. Another interesting trend that we see is the continuation of FEM projects. So there are still some clients who are on the 211 system. We've had some key FEM projects complete in the last year, and we already see a pipeline of FEM projects coming up. So someone like Excelian, who has 15 years experience of working in the Murex space, we still have, believe it or not, people who understand very well the 211 system. And I think we're being seen more and more as outright kind of specialists in the FEM space, simply because we understand both sides of the coin from a 211 perspective, a 3.1 perspective. We engage with Murex very well around all projects, but especially on the FEM side. So that's a real specialism that we can bring and gives us an edge in our competition with our fellow integrators. I guess the other trends that we're seeing is that traditionally a lot of clients would have tried to go it alone in terms of trying to mobilise and deliver these large programs of work. And as always, there was a real mix in the market between those who would try and do it entirely by themselves and those who would entirely outsource the work to an integrator. We see that the actual engagement around consultancy services is actually increasing. So we see that clients are probably being a bit more risk averse, probably equating to the scale and the size of risk that they have to undertake in terms of the programs that they're trying to deliver. So we see that clients are definitely coming more and more to consultancies, and clients are less inclined to try and engage with the program themselves by trying to augment capacity from the market, which means that we see decreasing focus on contractors being engaged directly by the client in order to form a team to then try and deliver these large-scale programs by themselves. That being said, there's some quite interesting modes of engagement and mixed mode of engagement that we see coming from clients, partly driven by the fact that clients obviously recognise that there's a dilution in the market. There are so many Murex projects just now in the market that they're kind of calibrating that versus how they want to approach certain projects, how they want to build their internal capabilities. At what point have they built a sufficient critical mass of internal capability to probably finish some of these programs? So we see modes where clients want to engage a consultancy for the first 2 years, let's say, of a 5-year program, and then they want to see the integrator effectively managing themselves out by upskilling the client organisation. Or we see from the start client organisations wanting to engage on like a 50-50 basis, integrator versus internal capability, again with a view to moving towards delivering more of the project themselves in-house. And then, of course, we have the traditional kind of engagement where a client is happy to engage with an integrator for 4, 5, 6 years throughout the life of the program. So it's interesting, and each client is different, and each client's perspective on using consultancies, the assessment of their internal capabilities, their aspiration to build an internal capability versus outsource or use a managed service is quite different from client to client. So it's certainly been interesting over the last 9 months to have that kind of insight into the different approaches taken by different clients. So looking at some of the implementation insights, so some of the common themes or interesting factors that we see in terms of the programs that are being brought to bear. So some clients laugh when we say this, and we come to discuss it in the next slide, which is that building the Murex solution, which you think is and it is, of course, the very core of these programs, is not necessarily the biggest challenge that we see in a lot of these programs today. And that's largely due to the investment that Murex has made in commoditizing the core of Murex, the investment that Murex has made in the professional services that they have, the investment in pre-packaging, the fact that we've managed to implement with Murex, and Murex has managed to implement successfully with their integrator network, means that the Murex solution and the process of implementing Murex has become, at least the core of Murex, has become highly commoditized. It's something that's well known, it's well practiced, and therefore actually achieving a build for FX, FXO, derivatives, fixed income, collateral, whatever, isn't necessarily the riskiest aspect of these large programs. Okay, what is typically the riskier part is the amount of parallelism that we see in these programs. So that over 5 years, there's maybe 7 or 8 streams of work that need to be delivered. Managing the change management of implementing that scale of change within an organisation across business and IT, these tend to be the larger challenges that we see. Another common theme is that every client wants to engage Murex on a single vendor basis. So there's no front versus back split or front versus risk split. It could be that during consolidation, Murex doesn't cover every single functional aspect within the IB, but in a lot of them it's very close. So everyone is looking for a single vendor solution and also a single instance solution. So they want multi-asset class front to back to risk on a single instance. And that, that clearly is a challenge for the operating model for the program. We'll come on to discuss that in a little bit. Every large change program needs, a target operating model definition phase up front, so that we actually understand the functional architecture that we're targeting. We actually understand the logical, technical architecture that we're targeting, and then that can be drilled down to the actual physical implementation, be it on the infrastructural side, be it on the integration architectural side. And we see a lot of interesting kind of mix of approach here. Some clients have opted to go for the traditional business consulting providers in the market and do a classical kind of business consulting type operating model definition up front. Others recognise that they need to go for more fit for purpose target operating model definition, which gels much more with the M-Express style methodology, meaning that when we define the target operating model, it's done in conjunction with the SI, it's done in conjunction with Murex, and therefore the gap between the output of the target operating model phase and the inputs that are required for the, let's say, design phase and solution design around Murex is much closer than if we just do it purely agnostic of the Murex solution. So we see that there's the potential to actually expand methodology offerings to make sure that the target operating model definition is much more aligned with the entry points into the program, and it's not really seen as a standalone piece of business consulting that you might traditionally think that it is. Transitioning from the target operating model to solution design, again, there's choices to be made. Some clients prefer to drill from the blueprint of their functional capabilities into high-level requirements, and then produce detailed requirement documentation that then allows us at a very granular level to transition from that detailed requirement definition into, let's say, the upfront design workshops that are required by MXpress. Others are quite happy to, if you like, trust the agile approach and trust the fact that because there are so many areas of Murex which are highly commoditized, you don't need to write 100 pages of documentation to describe what Murex is already capable of doing, and therefore they trust the agile process, they trust the translation through the scoping exercise, through the design workshop cycle of translating high-level requirements into the blueprint of the Murex solution design. Managing parallelism, I've talked a little about that in terms of, if you have a 4 or 5 year program of work and you have 7 or 8 overlapping multiple phases of MXpress which are delivering, clearly that's a key challenge for any project. And also given the fact that we're deploying onto a single instance, the operating model of the project needs to be considered as well, meaning that we see and we advise very strongly to adopt an approach where we might have a centralized build factory, we might have a centralized test factory, we have centralized control over production and how we transition from project into production. And by taking that kind of centralized approach, it helps us, first of all, affect design decisions much better across each of the streams and each of the groups who are operating within the build and test phase. It allows us to achieve economies of scale much better in terms of centralized teams. We can anticipate the future demand, we can anticipate and ramp up, or we can anticipate that there's a tail on some of the activities and ramp down accordingly. So it's not that if you have a large program and you have 5 key streams, that each of those streams represent a project in its own right. It's more matrix style in terms of organization, and that you'll have someone responsible for delivering, for example, the interest rate derivative stream, but they're going to leverage very heavily on centralized build, centralized test factories within the overall operating model. And again, that kind of centralization theme lends itself very well to being offshored or nearshored as well, which is where our CE centers are going to play a strong part. Again, a key challenge for some of the client organizations is many of the PMs or program managers who are engaging with Murex for the first time have come from a bespoke build background, meaning that, okay, they're building stuff in Java, they understand DevOps very well, they can understand continuous integration and deployment very well, and they tend to struggle a little bit in terms of vendor package solutions. So how do I take my bespoke methodology and how do I apply it to Murex? And what that means is that there's a strong emphasis and continued emphasis, which is recognised by both clients, Murex and the integrator network, around strength and depth around environment management, configuration management, test automation. They need to have good discipline around smoke testing and regression testing, built environments ahead of whatever purpose they're going to be used for, be it dress rehearsals, UAT, SIT, etc. So those are core skills. They're continually in demand, and every integrator is looking to expand their skill and capability, assets and tooling around that space, because it's really a key success factor for a lot of these large programs. Regulatory considerations are also something that we see as ubiquitous in these programs. So very often the regulator will see these programs as material changes to the frameworks of these banks, meaning their ability to manage risk, ability to manage operational risk, how the transfer of positions occurs within the project, how rigorously are they checked, the audit and compliance that the regulators will put on the organisation to prove and explain deltas pre and post migration means that they very heavily shape the testing strategies for several business functions within the program, and that in itself reflects back on what the program needs to do and improve. And it can sometimes impose some quite rigorous testing considerations when we enter into SIT, UET, dress rehearsals, etc. The other interesting trend that we see from the kind of regulatory space is sometimes the regulator's insistence of revalidating all of the Murex models. So this kind of model validation, Murex models, be it native models or be it externally integrated models or the Murex Max models versus some kind of independent implementation of that model by the BIAMS quants. We're seeing a kind of resurgence in that space and a strong demand for kind of front office but quantitative consultants to engage in that space. So transition from project to production support. So a number of these organizations don't have Murex. They need to stand up production support from scratch. We see a mixed mode again of clients wanting to take the production support in-house versus preparing to run production support as a managed service, for example. And therefore, from a production support perspective, that's very interesting, right? We need to define what production support is. We need to define the organisation, skill the organisation. We need to understand how the production support ramps up with each of the go-lives within the programme. We need to understand how we cycle the production support team into the project to gain insight into what's going to be delivered back into production, and very close collaboration between the production support team and the project team as we enter into stabilisation phases immediately post-go-live. And another thing that we see, which is a good trend, is that at least for the programs of work which are 4 or 5 years or if not longer in length, that we have a pre-planned upgrade within the project. We don't leave it to chance. Very good collaboration between the client and Murex and the integrator in terms of conceiving the approach. So there's always a placeholder for an upgrade after 2 years, so that you know that you're going to, first of all, collect necessary developments that are required for subsequent phases, but also that you're making sure that throughout the program you stay current. You don't execute a 5-year program of work and find at the end of it that your binary is 5 years old and you're immediately faced with an upgrade. So that's a very good aspect of the recent programs that we've seen. So talking a little bit about one of the cornerstones of these programs is the success of being able to affect the actual Murex solution itself. And I think I've discussed many of these points already, which is the increasing commoditization of the core Murex product. So meaning that building the Murex solution, as far as we see it, is one of the least riskiest aspects of these large programs of work. That's made possible by the huge investment that Murex has made in the product itself, in terms of its level of quality, the competence that you see within the Murex professional services team, the investment that's made in pre-packaging, the investment that's made in making sure that the methodology, be it MXpress, MX Plus, FEM, whatever, is well understood, that the roles and responsibilities in the kind of tri-party model between client, Murex and integrator is well known. And also we've had many executions of successful Murex implementations. So not only is the product of high quality and very commoditized, but the process of delivering the product into the client organization is also highly commoditized and of high quality, meaning that we can have repeatable quality and predictable implementations for clients, which is important during these large programs of work. These large programs of work, we want the client to be focused on managing the change management, managing the decommissioning and the realization of cash flows around decommissioning, which is often a driver for the business case for these large programs of work. And you shouldn't be an overly large amount of management attention directed towards actually delivering a technology solution, especially in some of the foundation asset classes and processes that Murex support. So we see this as a very positive trend. And again, it's probably something that's underpinning the fact that clients are more open to using consultancies because they see the success of the Murex implementations in recent years, and they want to replicate that success on their programs. So taking a very kind of broad look on the Murex product trends. So obviously, the cycle that we've seen in the last few years of a lot of uptake of transformational type projects has opened up a lot of opportunities for Murex to sell in, if you like, a lot of the modules that have already existed. So if we look at the VAR module, we look at MLC, which has been used for credit limits as well as, let's say, compliance reasons. The collateral module, these are all common themes of the large transformation projects that we've seen. So in terms of, so if you like, a bit of a resurgence in the VAR and MLC space caused by these projects, and also from a collateral perspective, it allows Murex to push what's already been a successful, let's say, relaunch in the last few years of their collateral offering. It allows them to expand the footprint amongst several clients and allows them to push out and provide a platform for offering the latest developments around the collateral space. If we look going forward, very much what Murex want to do in terms of the analytics space around collateral, in terms of collateral optimization, for example. We also see from these programs of work very good traction in the CVA space, PFE space. So as you'd expect, as part of the transformation, some banks taking the opportunity to consolidate all of their ERM activity onto Murex, meaning that more often than not, you see them taking the full suite of ERM modules that are available from Murex. On the regulatory side, there's a very different strategy that needs to be taken by banks who are undergoing these large transformation programs. Murex isn't going to be implemented, at least let's say the first go live might not be for 18 months and the full program may not be complete for 5 years, meaning that Murex can be the vehicle for some regulatory requirements, but nonetheless the bank is still going to have to address the regulatory requirements largely on the legacy stack. So there needs to be a parallel strategy about how banks deal with all of the regulatory change at the same time as implementing the Murex solution. Now, there are some mixed strategies for that, meaning that Murex can actually execute some of the regulatory reporting, some of the regulatory calculations and analytics that are required for the asset classes that are live on Murex at a given point in time, but then the overall aggregation of those results still take place on a legacy system, on an interim system. Because for things like FRTB, you need to have a very large amount of asset classes live on a single instance of Murex, for example, and able to drive the full solution from Murex. Nonetheless, Murex have very good traction around the FRTB space. I think they have tens upon tens of clients who are going through the kind of pre-sales process just now. I think there are more than a handful of implementations that are kicking off around FRTB. And from an FRTB perspective, that's no surprise, because all of the elements within FRTB in terms of being able to drive the standardized approach or the internal model approach, all of the scenario definition, scenario generation that needs to occur, all of the aggregation of those results, the P&L attribution and decomposition that's required as part of FRTB. These are all very close to historical functionalities that Murex have already had. And in terms of the NFR challenge around FRTB, meaning multiple very heavy scenarios being required to be run, for example, both the internal model approach, but also the revised standard approach, Murex has already been looking to tackle some very heavy NFR requirements historically, around Monte Carlo, if you look at the work that they're doing, around Livebook, if you look at what they're doing around MRA, MRB, etc., then Murex were always well positioned to react to the FRTB requirement very well. And I think there's very good take-up of FRTB for Murex in the market. Likewise, Murex are ready for a number of other regulatory solutions, so the BCPS, IOSCO requirements, so that the requirement to exchange margin on bilateral uncleared OTC, Murex have a solution in place. SECCR, Murex has a solution in place. Support for liquidity ratio, stability of funding ratio, QIS, and support for the accounting standards are all there. And I'm sure as time progresses, there'll be a good take-up within the Murex space around that. Very quickly, in terms of specific solutions, so there's no surprise that a lot of the kind of transformation programs that we see, people are rolling off Condor Plus, they're rolling off Wall Street, meaning that the whole treasury space is being rolled up into Murex. And Murex will continue to consolidate. I think their dominance in terms of a very positive trend as being already, the treasury kind of platform of choice. pushing into investment management space. So for a long time now, investment management buy side has been looking to diversify. Murex is an ideal platform for that. It's already cross-asset, handles all of the life cycle events. Murex are now pushing to get the portfolio analytics into Murex to complement what's already there from a cross-asset perspective. Murex is well placed to deal with the compliance requirements of the buy-side organisations, the regulatory requirements of buy-side organisations, and of course collateral management is quite important to buy-side organisations as well. So no surprise that Murex are already picking up buy-side clients, but they're obviously well positioned to push forward in that space. And of course, we talked a little bit about this already, but support for specialised desks. So depending on a bank's setup and structure, whether they have a centralised trading desk for CVA, FVA, etc. Clearly, Murex are well placed to support that type of operating model within banks. And as well, of course, Murex are well placed to provide all kind of XVA margin requirements up front to traders at the point of trading, so a trader can see what his FVA charges, what his CVA charges, the margin that he's going to have to post for a non-cleared OTC, etc. All of these frameworks are going to be available through Murex, and therefore it's going to become well positioned in terms of being the tool of choice, let's say, in the trading space, given the demands of the pre-trade analytics that you now need to make a decision to trade. So all things considered, in terms of where we see Murex in the midterm, Murex have already dominated the risk technology and Asia risk technology rankings in previous years, as well as in terms of the Gartner Magic Quadrant reviews. Murex is seen as a leader across all of those areas. I think given the traction that Murex has had in the last few years, about all of the wins that it's picked up, just allows it to consolidate its position not only with new clients, but it allows to be in a position to actually understand the innovations across the industry that it needs to adopt in order to move its clients forward and move its own product forward. So it's very difficult to see that Murex would be unseated from its current position as the de facto leader, the de facto one-stop shop for financial institutions for an integrated solution. And I think the other aspect as well is that we touched on before about the professional services side, the actual implementation and execution of Murex implementations are also only going to benefit. So you'd imagine that Murex, in terms of the M Express kind of implementation, when you scale it up to these large kind of programs, that I wouldn't be very surprised to see if Murex then come to market with some understanding of how to execute these very large programs and have some kind of all-encompassing or holistic approach around large program methodology when you're centralizing to Murex, because they'll have gained a lot of insight into 3, 4, 5, 6 major programs of work and be able to cycle that back into their methodology and offering. So yeah, last 2 to 3 years has been excellent for Murex, and we can't see that that's going to be any different in the coming 3 to 5 years. So in terms of careers, in terms of careers at Excelian, obviously we've given you a flavour of the types of projects that we're engaged in, the types of activities that we foresee within these large programs of work. So not just the traditional nuts and bolts of achieving the functional and technical configuration of Murex, testing the Murex configuration, deploying it, supporting it, etc. We see a lot of stuff in the regulatory model validation space, target operating model space, challenges in team leading, teams who have to cope with a lot of demand from different project streams, and also from a project management perspective, program management perspective, some very interesting dynamics happening on these large programs of work. So we're an interesting place to work. We've got a long, stable pipeline of work. There's no sign that we wouldn't be as successful in the coming period as we have been in the past period in terms of being able to win new opportunities and expand existing opportunities to consolidate the pipeline of work that we have now, for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So we have a very wide variety of projects. We're dealing with a wide variety of clients, different styles of engagements, and those engagements are, available globally, in terms of all the geographies in which we operate. In terms of our career path, because we're a vendor package specialist, we're doing Murex today, we're going to be doing Murex tomorrow, we're going to be doing Murex next month, next year, etc. So, Murex is an organisation, Excelian is an organisation that, it values the specialism in the product, above everything else. Okay, so we're recognised specialists. That's where we've come from in the past. That's how we've managed to establish ourselves and consolidate our position in the market today. So Murex isn't a stepping stone within Excelian to some kind of other career. We're deeply rooted in the delivery and specialisation around Murex, and therefore you can feel quite comfortable that if you're someone who wants to purely be based in a delivery role, we're very happy for that. If you have someone who has aspirations for team lead or management, we've got plenty of opportunity to support that type of growth. In terms of functional domains, technical domains, support domains, we need people in all of those areas at all levels and all levels of expertise. And also, within Excelian, we have to drive our community of practice. We have to drive to make sure that we keep current in each of the front office, back office, architectural spaces. We need to make sure that we have constant and quality contact with Murex from a content perspective to understand what are Murex doing today, what are they doing in 5 years' time, how do we need to align the practice in that regard. We also need to understand what's happening in the industry, just from a pure business perspective, and we also need to help contribute towards implementation methodologies and pre-sales on various engagements that we have. So that's very rich a tapestry, if you like, of activities and opportunities that are open to our consultants within Excelian. And of course, as with all quality organisations, we are continually supporting your career goals. We have a good mentoring framework that's set up that people feel very valuable. You always have someone who's rooting for you in terms of promotions, bonuses, whatever it is, in terms of the normal cycle of your career. Personal development plans and our investment in L&D, you saw that we've invested, thousands of hours in training of our consultants, and again, very tied to being a specialist in the Murex space. We place a lot of emphasis on learning and development for our consultants, both within the Murex technology itself, but also within the wider industry trends. So in terms of how to understand understanding how to access those opportunities and who to speak to, there's a couple of links that you see on your screen. Like I said, our pipeline is very expansive. It's covering all areas of the system, all domains. We need consultants of all levels in order to fulfill the pipeline that we have coming up. In terms of a place to work as a permanent employee, it's excellent. We offer probably the leading opportunities in the Murex space today. And if you want to follow up more specifically with any of our individual recruiters, then you can use this following email address, resourcing@excelian.com, and you can see our team of recruiters there who'd be happy to talk to you about the existing opportunities that we have, or expand in more detail in terms of some precise opportunities that we have and that you might have heard of, or you might want to talk to us about in more detail. So thank you very much for your time today, and hopefully we'll have our next webinar very shortly. Thank you all. Bye.